Welcome to Childhelp's Dare to Care podcast, where every story of struggle transforms into a beacon of hope. Together, we'll uncover the courage to rise above our challenges and rediscover joy and resilience. Let's dare to care.
Due to the sensitive nature of the content, viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena, and this is the Childhelp Dare to Care Survivor Series podcast. We are broadcasting today from the Center for Positive Media. With me in studio here, Michael Maduro, the Chief of Staff for Childhelp.
Hello.
And the co-host of this show. And we are so glad to welcome into the studio Chuck Carpenter, who is a successful tech entrepreneur and also the host of Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot podcast. Chuck, we appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is the first time you are speaking out publicly about what you went through as a child, and we so appreciate you agreeing to sit down with us to tell your story. What we're trying to accomplish on this show is talking about, obviously, not sitting in the trauma, but talking about how you were able to move from those difficult moments into the place you're at today. And you're going to share some of that with the audience. If you would begin by talking a little bit about what happened for you as a child, and you suffered quite a bit of physical abuse.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it. So growing up in the Midwest in the 80s, I experienced probably what lots of people from that generation would have, which is corporal punishment as a result of, any sort of acting out or whatever. And this was even common in the schools, so I didn't really think much of it at the time. Your parents would spank you on the bottom. If you did a bit worse, they probably pull out the belt. Mine definitely did at school. If you acted out, then in a way that you got sent to the principal's office, that results in a swatting, which is a wooden paddle, which sounds crazy when you think about that today. Like, there's no way that would be accepted probably for most people's children.
Right.
So it never really seemed all that weird or different to me at the time until things really started to escalate, in particular with my father while my parents were still together. As best I can recall, it would have been somewhere around 10 years old, and him using a closed fist to hit me in the side. And obviously it hurts a lot. You go to your mother. Seems a little bit crazy, but conversely, you've seen your father do that to her various times. And so it was eventually my turn as I got older. So
you were about 10 years old when this abusive cycle really started to escalate. But you, at the time, you couldn't really identify it as abuse, right? Because you're saying that you were existing really in various degrees of violence.
Yeah.
How bad did things get over the years?
There were definitely times where more of that kind of abuse occurred. Open-handed hits at other parts of my body, sometimes close-handed hits, hard pushes and shoves and threats. I would say things got worse when my parents split up. And again, as I got older, it felt like, oh, now I'm growing and so do the threats and so does the violence. One of the first times I remember thinking like, this is kind of crazy and out of control and couldn't believe it was my brother. I have a younger brother who's 7 years younger. And we were with my father for the weekend. As that happens, it's obligatory when your parents get divorced, and now you need to spend time with both parents. And we were with him at his girlfriend's place playing video games with her son. And my father came in and said something, I don't recall what it was anymore, but that asking my brother something, he responded. My father didn't hear it. I repeated it. It was just like, oh, he said whatever, just kind of helping. And my father was very angry about that, screaming at me, telling me that I'm not the father that he is, and I better just shut my mouth, and slammed me to the ground and was choking me and pointing his finger in my face, letting me know all these things. And then I got punished and, put in a timeout out of that behavior, out of being upset that occurred to me. And then I had bruises around my throat and bruises on my body, and came back to my mother with that. And that's probably one of the times that like really stands out for me, that kind of, and that was more common after.
At the time, did you ever seek help from anyone? Did you ever?
No, nothing other than like sharing with my mom, and then she would get angry and they would get into a fight, and then it kind of doesn't really lead to anything. Yeah.
Was there anybody outside the home that knew?
Not that I know specifically. I mean, at that time, my father's girlfriend, who became his second wife, she definitely knew at least about like some of those specific things, but those things weren't happening to her and her son at that time. So I guess she just saw her way out of it. I would guess that immediate family would have been somewhat aware. I've talked to some of my like aunts and uncles later on, and shared some things, and they knew things were bad. They didn't know the specifics.
Do you think that they didn't want to know, that they didn't want to get involved for fear of consequence?
Yeah. So the way that most of my immediate family works is they're not really super close. It was things where we would get together on big holidays, and even that kind of dissipated more and more as I got into my teenage years. It didn't really happen anymore. And my grandparents, some of your anchors leave, I guess. So people were just living their own lives, really. And I don't think that anyone really had a capacity to like step in and do anything.
What did this do to you psychologically? As you look back now, and we'll talk in a moment about how you've started to unravel this, speak this aloud, and acknowledge this was abuse. I was in an abusive home, and that is not okay.
Right.
What did this do to you as a young man?
I just basically created my own life and escapism. So I, as a teenager, just made a lot of friends, tried to be very social, get involved in activities. Definitely, I started drinking pretty heavily at 15. So I would escape in those ways too, be out all night, be at parties, just basically be away from, I stopped visiting with my dad probably 15, 16 years old. You know, I slowed it up. And probably didn't go to visit him anymore when I was about 16, junior in high school or so.
When did you realize that you needed to start the therapeutic process to heal?
A very long time after. So in my 30s, in my mid 30s, being in a committed relationship, starting to talk about creating a family, and realizing that my coping mechanisms weren't really allowing me to be as open with my partner as possible, and foreshadowing to any of these like potential issues with my children. If I'm very isolated with these emotions, you know, how are you going to kind of create those bonds with children too?
So talk to us and take us through sort of the steps that you began to take to heal yourself. And I think that that's incredible. What you're saying is what I'm hearing you say is you wanted to be a good husband and a good father.
Yeah.
Break the cycle.
Break the cycle.
Break the cycle. Now, to be fair, with a lot of encouragement from my wife, it certainly, so I think one step back before that would be, in my life, I had isolated myself in a good way, created successes, and was actually like pretty happy living my life alone. And if that's the way it would have panned out, I was kind of okay. And I turned 30 and I was like, yeah, this is kind of good. I make friends. I have some relationships, but nothing too serious. I have a good job, and I travel some, and like life is pretty good. If this is the way that it pans out for the rest of my time, I was actually totally fine with that. So I would say that impetus for that leap and those changes were definitely like letting a partner into my life and deciding that I wasn't going to live it alone, and trying to like basically deconstruct and rethink all of these absolutes I had created. So that was one part of it, is that just being open to not having certainty in the decisions I'd made. Like there's no finality there. Maybe something else is on the cards for me. I don't have to be alone. And that, and I wasn't sad about that perspective. I was okay being alone, but what if you could have more? What if you could have something else? What if you could think about other things? So good conversations there, and just breaking open the possibilities and not using isolation as a coping mechanism is part of it. And then just trying, basically, after that, is saying I'm going to be open to trying, and then looking at therapists, taking some sessions, and then deciding, like, you don't have to take the first one that comes up in the in the list from your insurance, and and like, what style works for me, what helps me feel comfortable, because these are typically, obviously today, notwithstanding, is like, these are things that I don't talk about that much, that I am uncomfortable about, and to some degrees I've just kind of told myself, like, people have had it harder, and so, what makes me special about this? Like, just move on and get over yourself, really. I think that's a ideology that I took with myself for a long time, is like, could have been worse,
Well, you're minimizing your own trauma.
Right. For sure.
Really, which
way
happens.
Of trying to protect himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about delving into that therapy, because I think what's so interesting, Chuck, that the point that you're making, you were having success. You're a real smart guy. You're dealing with in the tech world, you have startups. So things are kind of rolling. You could have put it over here and said, my life is fine. I'm just not going to re-examine that. But with some encouragement from your now wife, and wanting to really be a whole person, to heal. And that's what Childhelp works so hard to help people acknowledge and realize that you deserve that. So what do you think in the therapeutic process was something that stands out, or a moment where you're like, wow, this really started to unlock things for me. This really helped me in my process?
Yeah, I would think that getting more comfortable with thinking about it, talking about it, like attaching emotions to it, really. I think that was probably like one of the initial unlocks. Two things, I guess I would think it's that is one part of it. And the other is that even during these successes and comfort and all of those, there would still be cycles of depression that I would fall into, and, just kind of suck up and deal with and cope with by myself. And so seeing that, rather than just deal with that as a norm, but actually like, oh wow, I can kind of feel okay about talking about this and having some sort of emotion. Like, it did bother me, and it maybe drives me into these cycles from time to time, and like just wanting to breathe a little bit and let go more. That having that feeling, even if it didn't, it wasn't a one and done, it wasn't that simple, but like having that feeling, having like moments of that were a real unlock for me, as like, okay, can I do more with this? Can I do better? Is this like, are these neural pathways forever in this other channel where, it makes me feel that way, so I've repressed ever thinking about it at all? Or can I actually like come to more logical terms around it and learn to move on in some ways? So, yeah,
but a lot of what, we're talking about and hearing is a lot of what individuals who grew up in an abusive home have experienced. You shared with me earlier, that your parents were abused as well in their child. So it's a cycle that continues forward. Going into alcohol at such a young age is a way of escaping and trying to mask the pain, numb the pain, move on. Getting very social into parties and environments where you can be with everybody and not seen as different in a negative way, but you can feel very alone and very isolated in that same moment as well. And then having somebody come into your life that is important, that loves you and sees you and wants to be a part of your life and accepts you for who you are, that you begin to open up a little bit of that pain and that trauma too. And she doesn't leave, and she stays, and she's encouraging, and she's loving, and she's supportive. And then you begin to start thinking, there's other opportunities for me that I don't have to. I'm fine. This is the way that my life was going, and I don't feel vulnerable. I don't feel exposed. I can be successful. And then you create a family and you want to break that cycle, and you see your own children and you dare to care about them in a way that's different than the upbringing that you got. And that's the thing that I think is so powerful about your story. And I see a lot of similarities in your life and in my life. And so I can feel and interpret a lot of what your thoughts and emotions are. And in part of that, it becomes those feelings of, I was okay. Nobody needs to know about anything that's going on. I'm going to be fine just through. But then I want to be able to be a better father. I want to be able to be a better husband. And I'm going to take some steps to talk to people that may not have been something that I was comfortable with growing up. I know growing up myself, therapy was just not a positive thing, an idea. It was a sign of weakness. It was a sign of vulnerability. And it was, nah, I'm good. And I remember the very first time I ever gone to therapy, it was the same thing. It was, I'm going to pay somebody that I'm going to then tell them all of the deepest, darkest secrets. That doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel comfortable. But when you finally find that care of self, and then you're wanting to be something greater for others, specifically those that mean the most to you, like a wife and children, therapy is incredible, and it opens up and it provides that healing. And big thanks and gratitude to therapists and social workers and counselors that are able to take those moments on, and then they got to carry that with them moving forward. But a lot of thanks and gratitude to the bravery that you were able to show in your own life to be able to break that cycle and be a part of a family and raise a family that doesn't have that type of abuse.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of it too, I think, is acknowledging that it's not your shame to carry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because so much when you come from a childhood like that, I would imagine, and from a lot of the interviews I'd conducted with people who've gone through that, there's a lot of shame.
Right.
It's not yours to carry.
Yeah.
Were you able to release some of that through this process?
Bit by bit, the journey's not over, right? So definitely bit by bit as the years go on, and I find different methods that provide different unlocks for me. Yeah, I think it's just such an artifact of my at least my generation and where I grew up, where there was still this whole, to be a man you need toughness, and you don't there's a lot you deal with, like put a Band-Aid on it kind of thing. So emotional things, suck it up. Little boys are told to suck it up. You get hurt playing sports, suck it up, get back in there.
Exactly right.
And that carries quite a bit, so
Yeah, that generation, you cry, you're a sissy.
Exactly.
Right? I'll give you
100%.
something to cry about if you're going to cry.
For sure.
A lot of that generational, which was the generation before that as well. It was just the way that things kind of carried and forward and were raised. It's one of the things that in the Childhelp Speak Up, Be Safe Prevention Education curriculum, the first thing that we talk about is identifying a safe adult, somebody that you can speak to and share, this is what's going on and help me navigate through this. And for those that, are older or not receiving that curriculum, the availability of a professional counselor, which is something that we offer through the Childhelp National Child Abuse Hotline, that ability to anonymously speak to somebody and say, hey, what I'm experiencing doesn't feel good. What I'm experiencing isn't right. Or what I'm witnessing somebody that I'm friends with or that I care about experiencing isn't right. Those were things that didn't exist back in our day. Back in our day, there was nobody. You just took it. And if you had a problem with it, you kept that to yourself. Elements that still carry a bit forward today, like they did back in our day, was abuse isn't an easy topic to talk about. Nobody wants to be, I was abused, or I'm a part of an abusive family, and the stigma that comes with that. And so when we were talking a little bit earlier, that's why I was asking, is there anybody outside the home that knew, because those things stay behind closed doors. And that's what we've got to break out of. We've got to change the mentality that stays behind closed doors. We have got to stand with each other and empower and support one another that are going through whatever that trauma is, be it something as severe as some of the trauma that we're talking about right now with physical abuse, to the most common form of abuse being neglect. We've got to create a culture in which it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to seek help. And that's what I'm excited about this series with. And I'm so thankful for you being willing to be vulnerable with us, share a little bit about that, and put a spotlight on the fact that it's a generational issue that, we're not out of. It's still an epidemic in this country today, and something that I hope we can get more comfortable talking about.
Yes. How does it feel for you today, sitting here telling this story to us?
It feels pretty good. Yeah, it was like almost maybe the term freeing to a degree, or normalizing some, because not even every close relationship I have knows this about me. It's not something I talk about all the time. Obviously, I have a lot of openness and freedom with my spouse. Some things with my mother. My mother knows about things, but we don't really talk now about how it affects me today, or I can't say that she even knows the amount of therapy or the depth that I've gone through there. I think most people kind of don't know. I have a couple of close friends, but really, like, this is the out there.
Were you resentful or upset, angry? I don't want to put words in your mouth, with your mom, or how did you feel about her?
Yeah. All of the above at some point or another, for sure. So obviously, when you're a child, you look to your parents as they're the ones that are supposed to protect you until they're not. And then when I was being abused by my father, mostly I looked to my mother to protect me when that would happen. And then I felt betrayed for a while when she became one of those abusers as well. So then I was kind of out. We've had a full cycle of relationship, I think. Like, there's times where we felt more like peers growing up together.
Yeah.
There's definitely times I was resentful to her for things she did or didn't do, really. I appreciate, though, that she worked really hard to try to do the best she could in her way. A lot of that would be trying to deal with inadequacies, like being able to help me emotionally. For as poor as I was a very spoiled child, though, too, which I was like, great, give it to me because I'm mad at all of you.
Yeah.
So there's that. To be honest, I'm not angry at her or my father anymore, really. It's an interesting thing because, like, I saw my father for the first time in like 25 years this past year. Part of it was like letting my kids know who they are, and someone in their 70s now, there's how harmful could that be? He can't really hurt me anymore. And like, I wanted to see if I had any emotional response to seeing him, and I really have a lot of indifference to it. Like, it's okay, you can embrace it, say you're sorry or not. It kind of like, I'm not mad and there's nothing you can do now. So all I can do is try to do better.
What would you want to say to someone who might be watching or listening and struggling to reconcile their own past?
I would say find a way that's comfortable for you to start to face that, and even to a degree embrace it, like, because you can't change the past, but what you can change is your thinking about it. And that's way more healthy than repression, I would say, because it never really goes away. So yeah, whatever outlet that is for you, like, find those things and just be patient, try everything that you're comfortable with, and see what works.
Chuck, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Congratulations on, the journey that you've been on and where you find yourself today with a beautiful wife, children, successful career. But I think one of the important storylines that I'm hearing from you is you can have success, you can have money, but unless you sort of get right within your heart and your soul, that's not a total win in life. And you wanted that holistic. Yeah.
Well, as I've gotten older, I've just found it to be very empty otherwise.
Yeah.
Well stated. Well stated. Thank you. Thank you for caring enough to share your story, being brave enough to be vulnerable with us. I know that's not an easy thing to do, and I just want you to know we appreciate it, and we're very thankful for you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chuck. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. I'm Carrie Pena alongside Michael Maduro. Take good care.
Thanks for joining us on Childhelp's Dare to Care podcast. If you found some inspiration from this conversation, please leave a written review on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Keep the conversation going with us on our YouTube channel in the comments.